back with Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of Palm Springs Air Museum. This is my favorite part of being here. This is the toy chest. And Greg, things will just have to leave here that we will never speak of that may come to the museum. The only thing is I don't know where to get the orange paint off. That's the only thing. So tell me about, gliders. Amazing.
Yep.
And active duty inventory. So these are what how often do you fly them?
So these aircraft, we have two Schweitzer 232 gliders built in Elmira, New York, and they're designated the X-26, which is the oldest active X program in the military.
Wow.
There's some interesting history there that you can Google about the low observable aircraft that the Army developed in Vietnam leading up to the Y-03, and that originated with glider technology and the Schweitzer brothers.
And they just basically lack of a better term, strapped a motor on a glider.
They put a motor in the back and then a very slow turning propeller up to the front, and they were using it for night surveillance missions in Vietnam. So our two X-26 Bravos that were here at the school, they were airborne in Vietnam during the Tet Offensive. Very successful intelligence program. They came back and then just kept developing aircraft for that same mission.
Wow.
But these gliders originally came to the school in the 60s and to Pax River for early jet development.
You were talking about that with cross-coupling, right?
Yeah, so the early jets, if you think about the F-9 Cougars and the Panthers, they had long, straight wings, tip tanks on the end, and there's a lot of inertial coupling and lateral directional coupling in those aircraft. And the gliders, because of this high aspect ratio wing, have very similar flying qualities. So the glider program was originally in support of early jets.
Really?
And now at the schoolhouse, all of our students will fly them. The helicopter pilots, the fixed-wing pilots, and all the engineers and flight officers will fly the glider in spins, loops, light aerobatics, and engine-out flight. So energy management, high aspect ratio, high lift to drag, very unique flying qualities. It's pretty awesome to do a loop and have it get absolutely quiet at the top when you're not doing any knots.
Yes.
It's zero knots, zero noise.
Does it kind of fall over at the top, or do you carry momentum, or does it?
It's just enough momentum to keep it carrying over the top, and it's quite an experience. And everybody usually finishes those flights with a big smile on their face. They're low stress events, honestly, in the course. But the learning that we get from it is really valuable. It's an uncomfortable environment, in that most people that come through here have never flown a glider before. They've never done a gliding, no engine profile, and the energy management you have to get right. High aspect ratio wing, high lift over drag, all those characteristics from a sailplane into the learning objectives. It's typically flown in the second half of the course and then towards the end, so they've gone through the course, they know a lot of the foundations, and now they're starting to really hone their skills as testers.
But you were telling me, and you have the students look out as you're stressing the wings, and you're watching the wing oil can, which is dimple.
Yep, so we'll pull about 3 Gs on our loops, and it's an aluminum wing with fabric control surfaces, but you can watch each of the panels between the ribs of the wing kind of pop up as you put G on it.
Oh boy.
It's kind of interesting.
And you were telling me that from a stress standpoint or a maintenance standpoint, fairly standard maintenance profile on this?
This airplane is maintained to FAA standards for gliders, and we do anything that's optional is mandatory for us. So we treat the condition of the airframes very seriously because we are doing aerobatics and spins in them. And they come apart, they get inspected, they get put back together, and we keep flying them.
That's amazing. Well, let's take a look at some of the others. There's a lot of really good stuff in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we are standing in front of the museum president's favorite airplane. Dan Gilbertson, if you're somewhere, we're going to send you this video. They have 2 of them. Of course, this is the Beaver. Tell me about this one.
So our Beavers, we've got 2 de Havilland Beavers. The military designation is U-6A. This airplane is a former United States Air Force asset, as you can tell by the secondary air scoop up on the cowl. Our other one was a retired Forest Service airplane from Maine. But very early in the pilot curriculum, we'll do a handling qualities evaluation. And week 6 in the course, we'll put a pilot in the front seat with very little academic instruction on how to operate a radial engine or how to operate a tail dragger. And it's a very big learning curve of, we need you to figure out how to do this.
You put bumpers on the runway and
A little
so
bit.
they can't do anything?
We will operate in the grass.
Yeah, there you
we
go.
do grass takeoff and landings. But very early in that course, the goal is to not be in that compensation. Like, I want them to have so little training in this aircraft that it's so different than anything they've done before, because we don't have anything like this in the fleet anymore. So they'll go out, just fly the airplane. Fly the airplane like you know how to fly an airplane, and then tell me why you don't like it. Try to tell me what's wrong with the airplane based on what you know about flying airplanes.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you get? What do you get? Or you get a lot of interesting comments on the airplane?
Well, generally, our F-18 pilots don't know how to use their feet on their rudders. So we'll very quickly start talking about that, because if you only try to use the yoke to roll the airplane, the adverse yaw created by the aileron deflection just swings that nose left and right very significantly, especially when you're trying to land. And trying to get that under control. And as you probably know, tail draggers are unstable on the ground.
Right.
And if you don't keep it straight, it'll try to flip around backwards.
Right.
So trying to get them to keep the airplane straight on the runway is a challenge. Use their feet, but not only use their feet, be able to look outside and tell that the airplane is moving left and right, because that's not something most pilots are used to scanning.
And having been in an airplane when it has done that on the ground, it is an unsettling feeling too. How do they do with it? I mean, do they come? Don't know that they come screaming, running from the airplane, going, "I'm glad that's done," or they're like, "Oh," because we operate so many tail draggers. Or do they fall in love with it?
It's a little bit of both.
Is it?
And everybody through this 48-week course, learns at a different pace. And some people will come with tailwheel experience, but they still don't transition well into this. Maybe it's been a long time. And the Beaver's very particular, and we give them an hour and a half to go figure it out.
Really?
And it's exciting to see our student population learn about the airplane. And it's also the next step of, it's not just learning how to fly the airplane. You have to learn how to describe what I'm doing with the controls and then what the airplane's doing in response to that.
Wow.
So I can't just say the airplane's terrible, because it's not. It's a well-respected bush plane. They're being flown all over the world. They've got 40,000 hours on some of them, and they're still being used in the workforce. It can clearly do the mission of a short field takeoff and landing support asset. So you need to be able to communicate, what is it that I'm doing as a pilot that's not executing the mission?
Well, we could add to your curriculum 6-barrel or 655-gallon drums to the Canadian Outback.
So roll into the back.
Yeah, and get it into the Outback fully loaded. But it's truly I've seen pictures of the airplane here, and I was surprised that you still had it. How long do you think you're going to keep it in the inventory?
These airplanes are very supportable, since there's still a lot of them flying in the world. We've got a good team of contractor maintenance that takes care of them. They learn the aircraft. They've got a lot of pride and ownership. And that aspect, I hope they're here forever.
So they're survivable for a very long period of time.
It's a very robust airplane. Like, you can have hard landings and it'll be okay.
Oh, yeah.
And it's straightforward. We've also modernized it. We've put some modern avionics in. It is IFR capable. Not that I want to go fly around the bad winter weather on the East Coast.
Dual stick?
I have dual controls.
Okay.
Most of our aircraft here are dual controls.
Okay.
And being able to see true mechanical flight controls. We talked about F-18 and augmented systems in the H-60. At some point, learning how base aircraft work with cables that go between your controls and the surfaces is very important as well.
Nice.
So we start with a foundation, and we just start building onto that foundation really rapidly.
And the reason I asked the stick question is some of them I've seen are actually single control airplanes. And it freaked me out when I saw that in this particular airplane, but I can understand absolutely why you'd have two sticks in this from your perspective. You're teaching. Mm-hmm. You have to grab the controls
reach over. That's not going to work.
Settle down now. All right, well, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
So as we've moved around this just incredible collection of airplanes that you fly, we come to one now that has probably the most history with the schoolhouse, and you have a lot of passion about this airplane. So why don't you tell me what we're standing in front of?
Yeah, people ask me all the time what my favorite airplane is. I've flown so many different types. I don't have one particular favorite, but I will say that this de Havilland Otter is near the top of that list. This particular airframe is Buno 144670. It was one of a handful that the Navy bought in 1956 from the de Havilland factory. It was flown to Rhode Island, disassembled, shipped via airplane to Antarctica, where it spent 10 years in support of Operation Deep Freeze.
Wow.
If you go to the museum in Pensacola, you'll see an otter hanging from the ceiling. It's newer than this airplane. And they also have the R-4D there, which is the Navy DC-3 that landed at the South Pole. This airplane was there supporting those missions in Operation Deep Freeze.
Wow.
This airplane spent 10 years on the ice. It was wrecked twice, but rebuildable wrecks, luckily. And they flew it off of the ice in 1966 as the last otter to leave Antarctica. The airplane then came here, into this hangar, into this schoolhouse, and it hasn't left since. So it's got a very long history at U.S. Naval Test Pilot School. And I look forward to seeing it continue to fly here for many, many years to come.
Well, it has a really interesting low-speed handling characteristics, as you were saying.
Yeah, the low-speed flying qualities of this airplane are quite unique. You know, it's 50% bigger than the Beaver, but it flies slower. It can take off shorter and land shorter. The flaps on this airplane are 100% of the wingspan, so the ailerons actually droop when you start putting the flaps down. They're also double slotted, so they've got a variable geometry on the way down. And that dramatic change of the wing allows this airplane to fly slow. Normal landing pattern speed is 60 knots on downwind, 60 knots around the corner, and then when we touch down, we're in the 40s. That'll stall at about 38 knots in the configurations that we fly it at, which are usually, 1,000 pounds under the max gross weight.
Okay. And that's what you really use it for, right? Low-speed handling characteristics.
So those handling qualities evaluation, the critical aspect of a short takeoff and landing mission is takeoff and landing. So I need an aircraft that I can do it with and compensate for any deficiencies. And there are deficiencies in the aircraft, especially as you compare it to modern systems. There's a lot of adverse yaw. It's what most would call sluggish. It's got low roll rates. It's got low frequency longitudinal response. It takes a lot of work to get the airplane flown precisely.
You're saying a lot of them are getting converted to turbines.
Yep.
And so that's probably the future of what's left of the fleet, wouldn't you think?
So of the flying otters that are left in the world today, I think 10 or less still have the radial 1340 engine on them. It's 600 horsepower, which was only 33% more than the Beaver for a 50% increased gross weight. So even though you could put anything in it and take off with these wonderful wing design in the flaps, the airplane doesn't really climb very well when you're heavy. So very early on, operators started converting it to turbines. The late 50s, early 60s, there more turboprops started being developed. So most of the aircraft you'll see today have turboprop. As far as the future of this airplane, one thing I know is that we love the history. It's got great learning usefulness left here at the Test Pilot School. We want to keep it flying here. And if that means we need to put a turbine engine on it, then maybe that's what we do. We have not decided that yet.
Stay tuned and see what happens. But obviously, this is a flying museum piece. I mean,
there's a lot of history here. It's very special to a lot of people. This is the T-6B Texan 2 trainer. Currently the Navy's primary training airplane, and the Air Force has been using it as a training airplane as well. All of our students that we're getting in now, we don't have any T-34 trained pilots anymore. Everybody that's coming to us has flown the T-6 in primary training. But we don't teach people how to fly. We teach them how to do flight test. So the student pilots will also get checked out in this airplane. They've got a full qual, and we use it for performance flight test, flying qualities, and some of the more fun things, safety photo chase. So a lot of our flight test missions, you have to have a photographer taking pictures or video of your test point as you're doing it. So we'll go out with another T-6 and practice some of those maneuvers where your mission is to support the photographer who's taking pictures of a flight test.
That's interesting.
Which is a little bit different kind of formation flying. It's completely different than what you do in an operational sense, where you're providing combat support. You're providing data via video or photography. And we also do a stall spin exercise in it. So in that profile, we'll do certification style stall testing. So how do you define the stall speed that goes into the flight manual? And then how do you determine how the airplane spins or how to recover from a spin? So we'll go through that process in what we call aggravated departure flight testing. We'll get to the point where in that flight, We usually do about 48 to 52 turns in a spin
Wow.
during, not total, not all at the same time,
Yeah.
but we'll do potentially 6 to 8 different spins of at least 6 turns each.
6 turns.
So we let them fully develop, and we'll apply either different entry criteria or different recovery criteria so that we can add that to the flight manual of this is an acceptable way to recover from a spin.
I've done some like high energy aerobatics and spins and stuff like that. I have to tell you that for me, it was the most terrifying.
I can see the discomfort in your face.
Yeah, it was just very unsettling when I did it. How is it with the students?
Yeah, some people get through it without any issues, but even the most hardened stomachs and inner ears, after doing 8 fully developed spins of 6 to 8 turns each, it gets pretty tiring. So the sortie's an hour and a half. You know, we put in safety things that you're not allowed to do touch and go landings on the backside. You just come home and land.
Just come and put it down.
And then get out of the airplane. And it's a fun flight.
Maybe for you. I'm at a point I think I'm done with e-ticket rides, which old Disneyland people will know what that. You might know what that is, but it's that's tough. Well, this to me again is just such a venerable aircraft.
Yep, it's a great trainer, and it's a good flight test trainer too.